Welcome to The Accidental Trainer, a podcast where you'll hear firsthand stories and tips on how to start and grow your training career.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ATD Accidental Trainer podcast. I'm your host, Alexandria Clapp, and today we have with us Jessica Kreigel. Jessica is the Chief Strategy Officer at Culture Partners, an author, podcast host, keynote speaker, and culture expert. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for having me.
I invited you today because our trends discussion with Carl Kopp last year was one of our most popular episodes. These types of trend articles always perform really well in the ATD blog as well. People want to know what is up for the year ahead. So I'm excited to take a moment to consider what's in store for 2025 and get your take and your predictions for our year ahead. So we're going to explore that topic shortly, but first let's chat a little bit about your origin story. Can you tell us how you landed in your current role and anything accidental that may have happened along the way?
Well, the big accidental moment that I had in my entire career was right after I graduated college. I moved to Italy and I was living in Italy with the guy I had met. His name was Fabio. And it was just, living the dream. I was teaching English. I had no career plan, no path, no idea what I wanted to do. I was a theater major in college, so that was a total dead end. My very first client that I got teaching English, which was the only job I could do in Italy because I didn't speak Italian, he was a guy that had a leadership development company. And he needed to learn English because in Europe, when two people from different countries come together, the common language that they speak is English, right? If an Italian and a French person meet, they talk English. And so English training was a huge need for him in his business. And he didn't speak a word of English. So I started teaching him. And when I understood why he was taking classes, I thought, I could do this. I mean, I'm a theater major. I know how to stand in front of a room of people and talk. Just tell me what to say. So the second class we ever had, I brought him my resume and a letter of why you should hire me, why I would be great for this. And I said, you should hire me to do all your English trainings. You teach me everything that you know, and I'll get that part of your business moving a lot faster than you can learn English. And he hired me. So that's how I got into the field. Total accident. I mean, it's certainly not something that was on my radar.
That is an amazing story.
Isn't that great? I mean, it was so fabulous. I spent 2.5 years working for him. And then after a while, I realized I really don't know anything about leadership or business. I should probably go learn something about that. So I went and got my MBA. And then when I graduated from the MBA, I went to a tech startup doing training consulting for an HCM software company that later got acquired by Oracle. I spent 10 years at Oracle doing organizational development. And then I left, became the CHRO of another tech startup called experience.com. Somewhere along the way, I wrote a book about generational dynamics at work, which got picked up. Started speaking about that. People just kept inviting me to talk about it because I think my perspective was different than what most were hearing at the time. Accidentally started a keynote career as a side hustle. And then that led me to getting a bunch of consulting engagements. So here's my second accidental story. In 2021-ish, I was getting so many requests for consulting engagements that I couldn't handle them. And I was looking for a consulting company that I could send my leads to and be like a reseller for, so that as I did keynotes, if someone needed consulting, I could pass them off to some consulting company that I trusted. Well, I went to this conference and I sat next to someone at lunch who worked at Tiffany's, the luxury jeweler. She was in the HR department. And I said, well, what are you doing for culture? And she said, oh, we just hired this great consulting firm called Culture Partners, and they've totally transformed our business and it's really driving results. And I thought that's rare to hear someone say that a culture consultant had a significant impact on the business results was something I had not heard very often. So I looked them up, reached out to the CEO on LinkedIn and said, hey, I just heard some great things about you. I'd love to talk. And I'd like to become a reseller. Here's my job. I do keynotes. I could send you a bunch of leads. And he said, how about instead you sell us your business and come on as our chief strategy officer? And so that was another accidental thing. So I ended up selling my keynote business, which who knew that you could even do that? And now I've been at Culture Partners for 2.5 years.
Wow. What a fun quick version of your story. I was curious about how you ended up in the culture land. Accidental, but also purposeful in the moment, right? So today we're going to talk about trends. Before we sort of break them down, you're going to reveal some trends and your predictions for us. One curiosity that I hear from the ATD community is just how do you separate out all the signals from the noise? It seems like stuff is noisier than ever. There's so many takes. There's so many AI written articles of what's trending, and being able to just have a reliable pulse or be able to do that discernment. Maybe you can share a little bit of your process before you break down what you're thinking about for the year ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way to get more accurate predictions is through triangulation. And that means that you're hitting multiple sources of information and seeing which things are coming up the most often. Now, some predictions can't be made, right? We cannot predict, for example, the Supreme Court ruling that DEI, affirmative action, they're going to repeal that. I mean, that was a sudden, unexpected shift in culture that I don't think anyone saw coming, right? And so there are moments in time that we won't be able to predict, but there are some things that we can just see. If everyone is talking about it, the collective consciousness is going in that direction. So the way that I go about doing it is, first of all, I'm a voracious reader. I am every day reading what's going on in the world of business, receiving media, but that's a lot of different signals, right? To your point. The second thing I do is we have a force of a team, people that are CEO whisperers, so to speak, with our clients, partnering with CEOs across every industry, from small to large organizations, from government agencies to nonprofit to for-profit to public and private companies. So I ask everyone on my team, what is it that you're hearing is bubbling up the most often? I'm also doing keynotes every week or two. And so the keynotes that I do are people who have a need within a community. Most often those communities are associations. So this isn't a real association, but it's like the International Association of Salt Shaker Makers needs someone to come and speak. I go and speak to them. And part of my process in speaking in those keynote events is talking to what is top of mind for the CEOs of all the salt shaker makers, right? And so I get access to an incredible amount of CEOs, not to mention I have a podcast where I deep dive with various CEOs. And it's really triangulating between the people I'm talking to, mostly leaders, the media I'm reading, the challenges that are coming up in the businesses that we're consulting with, and then just my casual conversations with other experts that I have become friends with. I have academic friends and other consulting friends in different businesses, private equity friends. And so I'm just seeing what bubbles up the most and hoping that it sticks.
Well, I want to jump right in because I know you have lots of good stuff to talk about and share. How can I set this up for you? I kind of just want you to be doing the revealing for us. What's trend number one that we should be thinking about this year?
Well, the most obvious is the executive administration shift that happened. We voted for Trump. So there was already significant impact in the business world and the world of work because of that. And you saw it in the December jobs report. It was much more positive than expected. I'm also hearing rumblings that a lot of businesses had an unexpectedly high Q4 and December in particular results. Why is that? Because 2024 was the year of wait and see. When you have an election coming up, you don't know whether we're going to swing hard to the right or swing hard to the left when it comes to business regulation, union regulation, all of these regulations that can go very far in one direction or another. We're unclear. And so CEOs as leaders, their job is to create a strategy to respond to the environment in order to win. And they don't know what environment they're responding to. So I think everyone paused in 2024, waiting with bated breath to see what would happen. Now, Trump won. What that does is it allows people to unpause. It's not necessarily that Trump winning is going to be good for business or bad for business, because both Biden and Trump argue that they are pro-business. They just have different approaches to how they encourage business to thrive, right? And philosophically, whether you think Trump is right or Biden is right, that's another episode for a political commentator. What I do know is that CEOs now have a lot less uncertainty about what 2025 and 2026 are going to bring. You can probably guess there's going to be defunding of certain federal agencies. There's probably going to be increased funding in immigration. You already see large organizations worrying about H-1B visas and immigration and getting our ducks in a row. And so what does that mean for unions? What does that mean for the workforce? What does it mean for minimum wage, for example? There's lots that we now have a better idea of. And so I think what you're already seeing is people putting the pedal to the metal because they know what strategy to approach. But one thing that is true about the Trump administration more than the Biden administration is that you never know what to expect, right? With Trump. I mean, apparently now Canada is on the table. So there are so many random things that have popped up since the election that probably were unexpected. So that also will be in the back of CEOs' minds, and that will impact businesses. I think there will be positive and negative impacts, and it will certainly depend on what industry you're in for how you as a CEO can manage those changes.
Yeah, that makes sense that for folks who work with some of these government agencies that you're talking about, they're going to have to change up what their compliance training looks like or what their training needs are, especially with funding changes. But an interesting point to remind us about, there's still a wild card factor that could come into play with this administration. Do you see L&D playing a role in helping organizations maybe reduce some anxiety or uncertainty while some of this policy change is happening, and knowing that maybe trainings are going to have to make some shifts really quick and fast, updating compliance training or whatever it is?
Absolutely. This isn't new for L&D professionals that are focused on the compliance space, because this is every 4 years, there's a new administration, new regulations. And so we need to update accordingly. And so that's one thing. I would say that's expected though, right? Not unexpected. There's also, I think, depending on the progressiveness of your leadership team, I've been seeing a lot of L&D teams focusing on mental health and how we can address mental health in learning and development in order to address a lot of the business needs. And I've actually been really interested in this last year, talking to CHROs about how far are you going on this? And there's reluctance from a lot of CHROs to go there. It feels like a liability. It feels like over their head. And it also doesn't feel like it has the support of the larger organization. There are some really incredible solutions out there that I've seen. For example, there's a doctor out of Florida who's created an e-learning that is something you can consume on Zoom or in your LMS that heals trauma, basically. I mean, I'm not a mental health professional, but it heals trauma in the form of an e-learning. And I have seen the scientific studies done on his work, and it really works. Now, he's been talking to CHROs about it, and a lot of people say, whoa, 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 don't say the word trauma. What do you mean trauma, right? But think of how it shows up in the workplace. Trauma is the experiences that you've had that shape your frame of reference for the world, the way that you receive interactions with other people. So in the workplace, if I give someone feedback and they have depression and anxiety, which can be a result of trauma, they are much less likely to receive that feedback positively. They're much more likely to feel attacked or upset or whatever. When that happens, I don't, as a manager, think, oh, this person maybe has some mental wellness issues that I can help address. What I think is, oh, how unprofessional, right? And so we're not really seeing each other, and it creates this challenge. And so I think more progressive companies are beginning to think about that, and others, it will still take a little bit of time.
I know that you have other trends to share. So should we jump to a second one?
Yeah, absolutely. AI. We cannot talk about 2025 without talking about AI. And AI is in some ways old news. 2024 was the year of AI. I think it was also one of the things that was creating pause in business leaders because they don't know what this means for us. Agentic AI. Do we need to jump on that bandwagon? You already saw many companies in 2024 lay off large swaths of their population, not to be replaced by AI, but rather to use the funds that were going towards labor towards R&D of AI. So we're not even replacing jobs yet. We're just taking that money that would have been spent on these people and spending it on AI to figure it out. Now, the thing I've been seeing that is concerning to me, I've had a lot of conversations about this. I just got off the phone, interviewed for my podcast, the head of global human capital management at Accenture, and she's seeing this too. AI-powered empathy. Communication in the workplace facilitated by and strengthened by AI tools. So let me paint a picture for what this looks like and why I'm so terrified about it. a AI vendor sells you a tool, and what that tool is starts with a psychology test, one of these assessments, right? You got Myers-Briggs, you got StrengthsFinder, DISC assessment, et cetera. This is a new one, or maybe it's not even a new one. It's using one of those, or it's using the big five, right? So now you've got everyone in the company has taken some kind of psychological assessment, and it understands what makes you tick versus me tick. Then it's integrated into our communication tools. So Slack, email, etc. I'm now sending you an email, Alexandria, you're my colleague, and I'm saying, hey, we really need to work on this project, whatever, shoot off the email. But the AI bot that's now integrated into the Outlook tool that we're using says, quick suggestion, Alexandria, her strengths and personality profile are XYZ. Perhaps instead of just saying, we need to work on this, you should start with, how are you? How was your weekend? Because she's really a relationship builder, and she will receive that email better if you add those comments. And then I accept those suggestions, and then I shoot off the email. Now you get the email and you think, I'm awesome because I spoke your language. I communicated with you exactly how you like to be communicated with. And you respond, great, my weekend was blah, 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 and yada, yada. And then you shoot me a reply, but the AI bot says, well, wait a minute, actually, Jessica's much more to the point. She doesn't like long emails. She's more interested in bullets. So why don't you simplify this email and reduce this talk about the weekend and just send it this way? And then you shoot it off. And then I get the email and I'm like, wow, Alexandria talks exactly like I like to be spoken to. And we haven't actually communicated. You don't actually know anything about me. I think you're awesome, but really what I think is awesome is the AI bot that was talking to me in my language. And so it's fragmenting the real relationships at work. It's doing that in Slack. It's prepping people before meetings. It says, hey, you have a meeting coming up with Joe. Joe likes to be spoken to this way. Maybe you should deliver the message for your meeting this way and organize the agenda accordingly. I mean, it sounds great. And the way that those tools are being sold is that it will reduce interpersonal friction, reduce silos, increase communication harmony. And I guess that's true. But when the empathy and the communication and the human connection is being super turbocharged by AI, is it real? And are we worried about it being real? And does the future, beyond 1 year look like all of us talking to robots and being in a little robot box? I mean, I have serious concerns about it. And I've already heard of massive companies that have bought these tools and are integrating these tools. And it's like they're already going, we're already moving in that direction. And I have been at an event where a number of CHROs have debated the ethical consequences of those kind of tools and whether they're positive or not, along with those sensing datas that look at email chatter in big data format, AI lens that then says, well, this person used to send longer emails. Now they send shorter emails. You should maybe check in on them on their mental health. Like, to what extent is that big brother? And to what extent is that looking out for someone? Ethicists can debate that.
Gosh, that is a really cool example, because part of me thought, if it's helping for productivity, like maybe that's okay. But when it's interfering with people being able to use their interpersonal skills and rely on their soft skills, I don't know, maybe that's where it gets murkier. I was curious if you were going to go into the direction of like talking about empathy training and like leadership training, like going back to sort of one of the things you were talking about before with the first trend, focusing on mental health, psychological safeties in there or something. And if AI can play a ethical role in those types of trainings, or if it just causes too many complications, like especially for just the relationship piece is something that well, I don't know. Now, as I'm saying, I'm downing myself. I was going to say should never go away, will always be there in the workplace, but maybe it is already going away with AI. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know either, right? This is part of these predictions are who really knows? Anyone who says they have a crystal ball is probably trying to sell you something. So take it all with a grain of salt. But I would argue that empathy training is old news, not new news, right? We've been doing that for a while. Psychological safety, unconscious bias, self-awareness training, self-actualization, self-realization. I mean, I've seen that for over a decade, right? Where AI plays a role is perhaps in the feedback loop. Instead of editing the email that I send you, what if it just said, here's something we noticed about the way that you're communicating. I know one of my character defects is that I send super short emails. I always forget to say, how was your weekend in an email? I don't even say, hi, Alexandria. I always start with, where's that file? And I know that in an email format, if you didn't know my personality, you would think, God, she's so mean and short and not kind at all, right? I mean, I don't disagree. It's how I'm showing up in an email, right? But it's not short and mean in my intention. It's short and mean in my execution. So to receive feedback saying, I've noticed that email is pretty short, doesn't even say hello. Do you want to maybe rethink that? That's the feedback loop that the colleague that I email is probably too scared to give me, because the colleague that I emailed, at least for me, right, probably isn't my superior. I may be their superior, and then they feel intimidated. There's a hierarchical social and power dynamic that means if you give me feedback and you piss me off, well, at that point, I control your salary, I control your career development, I control your job security. What incentive do you have to do that, right? People are not incented to give the truth to their superiors. And so that's why so many people struggle with wielding power in an organizational structure, because you get a lot less of the negative feedback and a lot more of the positive feedback because of the inherent power structure.
So my next question for you was going to be, do you have thoughts or ideas for how L&D folks can balance leveraging AI innovations while also kind of maintaining that authenticity or fostering that human connection? But that example, I feel like, would be an example of, yes, you can do this, but here's how you would tweak that example. Instead of actually editing the email, it's hopefully collaborating with you a little bit. But I'm going to pass it back to you if you have more thoughts on it.
No, I think that's exactly right. Hopefully, it won't go so far as to write the email for you. You also see this in performance management, where we're writing performance reviews in a tool and it suggests things that you can say based on the scores that you gave and the competencies that are being evaluated. And if you just copy paste that, I've been working for a year, devoting all of my time and attention and commitment to this effort. And then I receive a performance evaluation that is clearly AI generated. That's going to be a very negative experience for me. That leads to a belief that you don't really see me, you're phoning it in as a leader, and I don't really feel like you get me, and I don't know if this is the right place for me. So we want to avoid that. Having said that, those performance writers have been in existence for a decade, right? They exist, and anything that makes it easier for people to do their work and faster, usually it gets invented and it gets implemented. And so I think we are going to see it getting rewritten. I think it's really up to responsible AI advocates within your organization to say, let's not go all the way there. Let's just go halfway there. But then, of course, the pressure to innovate, the pressure to keep up with the Joneses and your competition will probably get you overridden by the executives at large who see their competitors doing something and say, we got to keep up. That's the danger of AI development generally.
That makes sense. And I think one of the observations I noticed, at least in the ATD community, is a big concern for what that AI policy looks like. So I do think that's a place where L&D can help in that regard, because if it's not someone else in your organization, I know that there's at least a bunch of L&D professionals who do have an eye for being responsible and ethical. And so maybe they can play a role in making sure to take on more of a leader role in helping define that policy, so that there is less of the just letting the AI thing write it for you. I know we could keep talking about this because it's AI. We can just have a whole episode about it, but I know you have other trends to talk about as well. So maybe we can jump.
Yeah, I think there is going to be a push to the 5-day in the office, return to office policy. We have been hybrid for a long time since COVID started, and we have started to slowly encourage employees back into the office. Last year was the year of 3-day return to office policy. This year is going to be the 5-day return to office policy. We've already started to see this push. We've seen Amazon, we've seen the federal government led by our DOGE department leaders, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who've said we're going to force federal employees back into the office with the hopes that they quit because they don't like being in the office 5 days a week. And we've seen JP Morgan try and force people back into the office. And what we've also seen, interestingly, is a complete operational failure at actually getting people back into the office 5 days a week because there's not enough desks, not enough parking, not enough elevators to get people to the floor. I mean, it's like we've forgotten how to logistically operate in person. And so there's been much pushback from employees and much pushback logistically from being able to handle the volume of people getting into the office 5 days a week. I believe that this is a short-term trend that will rise and fall. The benefits of working with flexibility to your ability to deliver results, to your productivity, to your ability to recruit and hire, attract, and retain talent from broad geographies. You're not limited by the small city that you live in. You're able to reach out to much greater skill sets all over the nation and internationally. That's just a no-brainer for business. And what wins for business wins ultimately. And flexibility wins for business impact. Forcing people into the office doesn't. So even though these CEOs think that they're, quote, losing their culture in this hybrid environment, ultimately the business results will speak for themselves.
I am kicking myself because I was just looking this up yesterday, and I'll have to find the article and post it in the show notes, but it talked about quiet flexibility. So even though there's sort of this loud, splashy, oh no, organizations are forcing people to go back into the office, return to office 5 days a week kind of thing, that there are a lot, and maybe a lot more than is being reported. So they don't want to advertise it, but they're on the down low, actually providing some of that flexibility. Have you been seeing that as well?
So many business terms over the last few years to understand and comprehend what's going on in the workplace. You see people coffee badging. You see the new quiet quitting. You've got quiet flexibility. It's a trial and error exercise. They're trying this, they're failing, they're trying that, they're trying again. And so what you're seeing is the large research think tanks and academic institutions that are doing research on what actually drives results. Those meta studies are where I'm looking to. The impact on attrition, that's not a coincidence, right? CEOs know if you force people back into the office, you're going to receive some attrition. We've had that data for 3 years now. That is why many CEOs are forcing people back into the office. And so that is a strategy. It's a business strategy, whether it's ethical or not. It's up to you to determine. The reality is we are going to continue to be in this trial and error mode. You see people gaming the system and you see companies gaming the system. So everyone's gaming each other. Got to get out of that mode and into the transparent, straightforward mode.
Yeah, gosh, for a lot of our listeners, they may be part of the task force that's helping define those terms and the logistics and the program to get folks back into office. So I'm curious if you have any thought about how they're maybe creating these. Hopefully there's going to be some blended, flexible programs in there that can accommodate hybrid. Like you said, a lot of folks are still hybrid, but then also the folks who may have a more rigid, full-on return to office, all or nothing kind of policy.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the people that you're talking about that are helping implement these policies don't agree with the policies, but they've been passed down and now they have to execute on something that they understand makes no sense. I know this because I frequently have this question. I was just in an event in November with a client that I was doing a keynote for, and the people who hired me for the event pulled me aside and said, can you help us figure out how to get people on board with coming back into the office? And so let me tell you what I told them. Maybe it's helpful to the people that are listening. So I'm an expert in workplace culture, and not touchy-feely kumbaya culture, and also not pizza parties and Zoom happy hour culture. I'm talking about how do you create the culture that your company needs to drive results on your strategy? And the framework that we use for that is something called the results pyramid. First, you have to identify the results you're trying to achieve. What is the result that you want? And it could be very high level, like a revenue target, or it could be more specific and granular. In this case, you want to get people back into the office. Well, in order to get results, people need to take action. So your employees need to do something. So if your goal is to get everyone in the office 5 days a week, that's the result. The action is you need everyone to show up 5 days a week. Well, that's where most people kind of stop in their thinking about how to create change in an organization. Well, we know that in order to get people in the office 5 days a week, they're going to have to show up. We'll just make them show up with a mandate. And that somehow is supposed to create this change that people act differently. Instead of going home or staying at home, they go to the office. But that we call that the action trap, which is just focusing on the action that needs to be taken and then either mandating or encouraging an action. That doesn't work, and you're seeing it not work. Instead, if you really want to create sustained behavioral change, you need to think about, well, what leads people to take action? What motivates our action? And the answer is our beliefs. The beliefs we hold about what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what's worth my time and not worth my time, what does my company think about me? All those beliefs are what lead people to take action, right? So if going into the office is optional, some people hold the belief that going into the office is positive and they go, and some people hold the belief that it's not and they don't. And if you mandate it, the people who don't think it's worth it to go in the office, their belief isn't going to change just because you mandate it. That's where you get the attrition. That's where you get the resistance. That's where you get the petitions and all of the anger resentment that can manifest because of that. So as a committee member in charge of that, you have to ask yourself, how do I shift beliefs? How do I get people to believe that coming into the office is the right thing? And you do that through experiences. We all have experiences every day that will inform our beliefs, that will lead us to take the right action, that will get you the result you want. So you have to think, what experience are they having when they come to the office? Is it helping them nurture and shift their belief that going into the office is bad, or is it hindering that? Now, if you have people going into the office and they don't see any of their colleagues that they actually work for or with, and they're on Zoom calls in a cubicle all day long, and they had to pay for their commute. I mean, I've seen some companies say, okay, well, we believe that the commute is now part of the workday, and so we're going to compensate you for your commute. That's an experience that they're giving employees that is shaping a belief. Well, okay, now I actually see the value in the commute because I'm getting paid to listen to my favorite song. And that shifts the belief that then gets them to take an action that will get you the result you're looking at. Conversation I've had with these committee members is, what experiences are your employees having about whether or not there's value in going to the office or not? And if you can shift those experiences, then you can get their beliefs to shift, which will get them to take the action you want. The mandates, that's just going to create friction.
I love it. I feel like you keep answering my follow-up questions because I was going
good.
I was thinking about employee engagement and how can L&D professionals help employee engagement during these transitions that may be, a process and take some time. Your answer sort of made me think like that is part of it, like experiences is part of tackling.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's all about experience management. What experiences are your people having and what beliefs is that leading to? I mean, even as managers, as team leaders, as vice presidents, as CEOs, from a leadership perspective, this is a really important model for you to understand too. If you want to get your people to do something differently, you cannot get stuck in the action trap, because not only is that going to frustrate them and burn them out, it's going to burn you out because you're focused on what action are they taking, and you've got 10 people that you're managing their actions, right? Instead, ask yourself, what shared belief does my team need to hold in order for us to achieve the results I need to achieve? And how can I create an experience for them where they will nurture and form that belief? Experiences can be as simple as the feedback that we give each other, the recognition that I'm giving you or a teammate, the stories that we're telling, right? These are all experiences. Another experience that people have is in the systems and processes of a business, right? As an L&D professional, you can see, what experience are my employees having when they go to learn? Is it a positive experience or a negative experience? Does it feel onerous or does it feel user friendly? And so that experience leads to a belief. I love learning or I don't. Is it simulation or is it some Zoom recording that sucks the life out of people? Have you catered your learning types that you offer to the learning styles of your workforce? Do you even know what learning styles your workforce has? So these are all ways in which experiences can shape beliefs that get you better outcomes.
I have a question that's sort of bubbling up that I'll just ask it because I'm thinking about trust, whether maybe you start to experience mistrust because it didn't align with your belief system and you're going back into the office, or even just to jump back to another trend we've been talking about, like the performance review example or the email conversation that you were actually having with a bot. That feels like a concern, that is trust in your leadership, in your organization, or who you're really talking to, or how much people are using AI, whatever it is. Just what are your thoughts? Is that true that it's just a growing concern, or it's just same old, but here's how we deal with it differently?
It's absolutely a growing concern. And I would argue that is the perfect tee up for another trend, which is the culture rebellion. And if you look at social media talking about workplace culture, it's mocking the idea of workplace culture, right? Pizza parties being mocked by people saying, ugh, give me a break with these pizza parties. And I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was just on Joe Rogan's podcast saying corporate culture has been completely neutered, right? So we've got the most powerful people in the world saying corporate culture is a joke. You've got frontline employees sharing on social media, corporate culture is a joke. You have people saying, how dare you act like we're family? We're not family. Corporate culture is almost irritating and there's a resistance to it, which is so funny as a corporate culture expert, because to me, the way I define culture is it's the way that people think and act to get results. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking of culture as pizza parties, I agree. It's totally annoying. If you're thinking of culture the way Mark Zuckerberg seems to be, which is DEI initiatives, that's also not culture because that's a program. Culture is how do people show up? How do they think and act at work to get you the results that you need? And the trust that is disintegrated is showing up everywhere in pop culture right now, in media, in conversations we're having. I mean, you're seeing the beginnings of a revolution, increased unionization efforts. You're seeing increased anti-work movement, increased distaste for the wealthy class. You saw that with the drama with the killing of the UHC CEO and the response to that, and Luigi being called a hero by people on social media. You saw that with the Me Too movement. You saw that with Black Lives Matter. You saw that with the 99%. I mean, we're going back, but it's building and building. And the people are revolting against the wealthy and the powerful, which are often being presented as the CEOs. The CEOs are kind of a persona that has been a catch-all for those with power and wealth. This culture rebellion, this is making it really hard to lead a business right now because you might be a fabulous CEO that's not super wealthy and not on the top end of the pay equity gap that continues to grow. Robert Reich, who's continuing to put more and more content out there to say, hey, wait a minute, look at this. We're getting further and further apart, the wealthy and the poor. What is happening is that is going to have to get addressed. It is starting to get addressed in pop culture, right? But that's going to need to be addressed within organizations. To stop with the us versus them mentality internally is going to be really hard because the trust is lost and it's getting lost-er with time and with more attention on these kind of conversations. So how exactly can an L&D professional create a sense of trust when there's already this idea that the leaders are lying to us? They don't have my best interest at heart. They don't care about me because they will lay me off the second they can, thanks to AI replacements. Then they're saying things in the town hall that are these super scrubbed communication talking points that the CEO is clearly reading the script on Zoom and they're not being real. And I don't feel like I'm being seen at all. And if the company doesn't achieve our goals, then I'm on the chopping block, right? That's a huge task. I think the answer is it has to go beyond training. Training can be part of it, but it has to go to the way that we show up in our one-on-one interactions. And that can be emboldened or amplified or supported by training. But really, the most powerful experience I have at work every day is the interactions I have with you one-on-one. You know, that is going to determine whether I subscribe to this culture rebellion or not.
This is so fun for me because one of your trends in your article, we're going to link it in the show notes, is middle managers facing extinction. My thought process was, this is going to lead to more mistrust. Like, this is not good. Isn't that like why people like to be at their job, is they have one person in their corner who they talk to and have like their association with the company that they're working for is my relationship with my manager sometimes, for better, for worse, right? So I am so curious if that's where you were heading when you're talking about those sacred one-to-one interactions that can help foster trust. What happens if you're losing managers? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, middle managers are not one thing. And so for some, it can be devastating. And I have had the jobs where that would have been devastating for me because my middle manager really had my back. But for others, it will be a relief because, you know, people suck at power. Okay. And when you get power in an organizational structure and your title goes from individual contributor to manager, and then it goes to VP, and then it goes to SVP, and then EVP, right? As you grow in an organization, your ego gets boosted a little bit. You are validated as being more important. You have more power. You're getting more money. We sometimes identify with our job title like it means our worth is higher as well. Like worthy as a human goes up in my mind because title goes up. That's kind of crazy in my opinion, but almost everyone does it. I've done it, right? I used to want to be a manager simply because it would make me feel better about myself. So it's a natural tendency, but when people get some of that power, they have no idea how to wield it, and it goes to their head, and then they use it to push people down, right? They use it to wield undue influence, and they don't do it in a nice way because not everyone is super self-aware. That's where L&D can really help, is helping people realize what their blind spots are and how they can show up to be more giving. But it's also really hard for middle managers because the incentive structures of most corporations incentivizes information hoarding. It incentivizes not communicating as much, not giving as much, but taking. And so then you're having to kind of operate opposite from the incentive structures. And it's really confusing. So a lot of middle managers are terrible. And the extinction of that layer will be a relief to some, and others, it will be devastating.
Any thoughts for how L&D professionals can help organizations thrive across the board if there's fewer middle managers, whether you're thinking that's maybe not so good, that it could still be a good thing?
Yes, I have very strong opinions about this. So first of all, L&D professionals need to be focused on business outcomes first and foremost, not just how much training are people taking, but like what is the impact and the application of that training. How is that showing up on driving business results? If you're not evaluating your L&D systems through that lens, you have to. And go check out Jack Phillips and Patty Phillips, the ROI Institute. I'm certified in their ROI methodology. It is a game changer for business. So, and I know ATD loves them, and you should, because they are keeping L&D relevant, right? In a way that really makes an impact and increases budgets. So that's great. When we're working with clients, we always say you have to start with results. So we talk to a CEO or an executive team and we say, what results are you trying to achieve? They have to get really crystal clear on what that is. And then they have a plan to create those results, which is their strategy. That's just business 101, right? We always start with results, but then we have to kind of let it go. There has to be a moment in which you don't stay only focused on results, but rather you're focused on the learnings and the feedback loop that will create the right effort to get those results. If your management teams, your middle managers and everyone are constantly meeting to say, how are we doing on the numbers? What's our bookings number? What's our EBITDA number? What's our customer NPS score? Whatever the results are you're trying to achieve, then it's so laser focused on results that you get in that action trap. Instead, you got to zoom out and say, what are we learning? And there's actually a CEO I just talked to yesterday. His name is Doug Merritt. He's the CEO of Aviatrix, which is a tech cloud networking company. And he said he doesn't have the weekly meetings on results. He has the daily meetings on learning. So he gets everyone to meet every day and say, what did you learn today? What did you learn today? And that's getting people to focus on the learning and actual development that will get you the right results. So you kind of create a plan and then you let the plan go. And that allows people a little bit of breathing room. It reduces burnout because you're not so stressed about reporting results to the leader and what does this mean for my job, right? And it facilitates learning. So I would love to see L&D professionals get in the business of facilitating those conversations a lot more, rather than just like what's in our LMS and what training are we providing this quarter, which is, at some of the big companies, what it's been delegated to.
Oh my gosh, that's like what L&D should have been doing all along. It's crazy that is a like suggestion or recommendation, because it makes so much sense.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's embarrassing that's not the case.
Wait, can I say one more thing? I know we're running out of time.
Of course.
Greg Sittel is this great academic researcher, and he's a consultant on change. And he wrote this book called Cascades. Everyone should read how to create change, basically. But the highlight that I pulled out from it that was the most impactful is most change management efforts are failing because it's been reduced to basically a communication plan and training. We're going to do this big shift. Let's say it's some digital adoption of a new technology. Well, let's create a communication plan and then let's create a bunch of training around it. And then that will somehow create the change. That's like a push mentality. We're pushing it down. Instead, what he says is you can get like a pull mentality of change, which is you find the people who are super into this change already. Those early adopters, just ask for volunteers. Is anyone interested in this technology? People will raise their hand. You could do it with AI. You can do it with culture transformation. You can do it with anything, right? You find the 10, 20 people who raise their hand and say, I would love to be a part of that. And you get them to implement the change in a small pilot. And then what they'll do is when they hit roadblocks, when there's a problem, they're so excited about this, they're going to put their heads together and figure it out and overcome that problem. And then they'll have some success that they can share. They start telling the story. People start hearing the story in the company saying, whoa, they're doing that. I want some of that. And it pulls people in. Sometimes the fastest way to create change is to start small with a small group of people who are already super aligned spiritually, mentally, emotionally with the effort. So if you want to create that kind of change in your L&D department where you stop worrying so much about what training do we offer and instead facilitate daily stand-ups about learning, start with people who are super into that idea already. Ask for volunteers, find the hand raisers who say, that sounds amazing. Not the people who are going to say daily stand-up, no way, right? Find the people bought in already, get them to pilot it, pull out the stories of the wins that created for them, and then share the stories widely. That's how you create change quickly.
And it's good advice as we're kicking off the new year and there is so much change ahead, especially if you're trying to make purposeful change, navigating around the forced change that's happening. It's a really good reminder. And I think it's a lot of advice that we get from a lot of guests to start small, do those pilots, take advantage of the early adopters. So hopefully our listeners are hearing some themes if they were off for the holidays and it's reminding them like, oh yeah, this is go time. All of those strategies maybe still apply. Well, any other thoughts on trends before we wrap it up for this conversation?
I would just say always leave a little bit of room in your brain for the completely unexpected. Who knows what's to happen? One of my favorite trainings I do with executives is scenario planning, where for 2 days we get in a room and we imagine what the world might look like 25 years from now. And then we pick some realities that we think could or could not happen. And then we create a matrix of what the future could look like that could be this or that or this or that, right? And when you have 4 possible future world scenarios, you can create a strategy that you think will most likely fit that future, but then also satellite strategies that are kind of backup, maybe less investment in those satellite strategies, maybe no investment, but simply a conversation amongst the executive team. So if something pivots quickly in the world, you as an organization have actually already had a conversation about what might you do in response to that. That scenario planning is one of those things that's the important but not urgent work that often gets missed because it's not something on fire today. And so as an L&D team, if you have the ability to facilitate a scenario planning conversation looking super far out, I would encourage that too, because it expands the thinking of your leaders.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So many thoughts popped into my head, like planning for traveling with our baby. We did a lot of scenario planning for being prepared for the unexpected.
Are you like those people who handed out headphones and candy and a thank you note to everyone on the airplane?
Oh no, she's not at that age yet. She luckily is in like actually a really great age. We were planning for unexpected accidents and spit up incidents to occur, which didn't. So that was great. But this has been so much fun. I want to make sure that we get a chance to talk about you again before we close out today. Can you share any learning goals that you have going on?
Yes. So I am particularly interested in this last thing that we talked about. If we focus on learning throughout every day as executives, instead of how are we doing on results, the dashboard check-in that just consumes so much of our meetings, I think that will result in better results. That's my theory. So I want to research that right now. I did some research with Stanford last year. Actually, right before we met, I sent them an email saying, hey, I got another idea for a research project. Does leadership that focuses on learning create better business results as measured by financial outcomes of the corporation compared to leaders that focus on results-driven activity? That's the question. And so if you or anyone you know has research or seen research on that, please email me because I would love to see it. That's where I'm spending my time in 2025.
Awesome. And how can folks keep up with your activity?
I have a weekly newsletter that goes live on Wednesdays called This Week in Culture on LinkedIn. You can follow me on there and reach out to me there. If you have that research that you want to send it to me on LinkedIn. You can find me there. And then my website is jessicakreigel.com. If you have a keynote coming up, you can book me there. And then I work for, as you know, Culture Partners. So check out culturepartners.com if you're into the culture consulting work.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jessica.
Thanks for having me. It was such a great conversation.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from the Association for Talent Development. Be sure to check the show notes for resources mentioned in today's episode. And if you found the show useful or insightful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.